Hello guys and welcome to episode 2, another installment of Muscle Talks Radio. Now in this episode I'm going to primarily be talking about training tips for newbies to the gym, but don't worry, there will be elements of this podcast that everybody can take away. So if you're not perhaps new to the gym, don't be discouraged. I have included enough content to keep you guys entertained as well. I would just like to start, however, by sending out a message of thanks to everyone who's supported the first episode on motivation and overcoming setbacks. To be honest with you, the response from that was much better than what I was hoping for. These are available on YouTube, on the TD Training YouTube channel. So all you would have to do is search Muscle Talks Radio on your YouTube and be sure to check it out on there. So, cracking on with the topic of this episode, tip number 1 would be to do your research. I don't mean sitting behind a computer for hours and hours researching different training styles, but actually get into the gym, try out a few different workout styles. So, for example, you might have your powerlifting, you might have your hypertrophy training, or you might have toning and conditioning training, or even cardiovascular training. Find out what style works for you in terms of getting you closer to your goal. So it's important to focus on what works for you in the first instance, because training for somebody else's goal isn't going to push you further in the direction you want to go. But once you've found your training style, make sure you're constantly, progressively overloading your lifts. So make sure you're gradually increasing the stress placed on your working muscles throughout your weeks of training. So for example, let's just say you're doing a push-pull leg split. So 3 days a week. Obviously you can do 6 if you want to, with 1 rest day in between. What you would do is, let's just say, for example, we're taking the bench press on a push day. We're starting at 60 kilos. So we're going to work to a rep range of no more than 8 to 12 reps. So once we're hitting 12 reps consistently, say for 1 week, 2 weeks, you've hit 12 reps quite easily. Then we're going to up the weight to perhaps 65, 70 kilos. Bring the reps down accordingly to what you can manage before working back up to the 12, and so on and so on. Now, that's just for one exercise. If you can imagine the kind of results you'll get from constantly training like that through every single exercise, through all your body parts, the gains you're going to get, and the amount of muscle that you'll add in a short space of time, if of course that's your goal, will be quite incredible, providing you have a sustainable nutrition plan in place. Now, we'll cover that in another episode about flexible dieting and how you can work out your macro split depending on your goal. That will come later. But for now, focus on constantly pushing yourself, making sure you're working hard enough in the correct style of training. I kind of crossed over into my tip number 2 when I spoke about progressive overload. However, I only gave the one example of sort of hypertrophy, whereas that doesn't just apply to building muscle and weight training. You could also apply it to your cardiovascular training, in the sense that if you were training for a particular event or you just wanted to get a little bit fitter, what you could do is say, I want to run 5k in, 20 minutes. What you can do is set that as your goal. Over weeks of training, increase the distance you are running by a set amount once you become more comfortable, or even just running at a faster pace for set intervals until you're able to run actually, say, a quicker 1k time before continuing until you're able to bring your overall 5k time down. So that's tip number 2, is to constantly, progressively overload your training. Moving on, another tip for gym-based weight training is to make sure you are consistently hitting your compound movements. So that's things like your bench press, squats, deadlifts, your overhead press, and tricep dips. These are the exercises that are going to recruit the most muscle fibers, and they're going to require the most energy due to you recruiting more muscle fibers. So these are exercises that will require force from more than one muscle. So for example, you've got your bench press, which would use your chest or your pecs as a primary muscle and your triceps as a secondary muscle. There is a little bit of anterior delt in there as well, but I'm sure you get the idea. By hitting these movements consistently and hitting them hard, you are going to build a very strong foundation to any accessory work you might do, and you will see some impressive strength gains. It will primarily be these compound movements that pave the way for the rest of your training. Once you've nailed these 5 basic exercises, you'll then be able to progress into more complex training, such as your accessory work for individual muscle groups. My next tip for weight training would be to not be afraid to start using lighter weights, perfect your technique, and then increasing the weight. Going to the gym, how many people do you see doing what they believe to be a good workout, but they're only doing partial reps with a much heavier weight than what they can handle? And you can see that. Don't be that guy, or girl, of course. Make sure you select a weight that you can use for the full range of motion on every single exercise. Not only will this help your muscles to form and grow properly, but will also prevent injury. As much as it's about training hard, it's more so about training smart. Getting a new PR is cool if you can handle the weight. Don't injure yourself trying to lift more weight than what your body can handle, because it's only going to go one way. And on that note, moving on to my next tip, make sure your training intensity matches your goal. Don't just go to the gym and go through the motions and you're not really thinking about what you're doing. You're just doing it because you've seen other people doing it and it looks cool. Try actually putting your mind to it, timing your rest periods. Another good tip I personally do is log my workouts. This allows me to see what exercises I might have done the previous week and the weight I've lifted. When I come to do them next time, I've got that as a base to go on. So coming back to that progressive overload example, but not just that, I also am able to keep the intensity of my training up through using the adequate weights. If ever you guys need any help with that, there is a fantastic documentary by Dorian Yates called Blood and Guts. It's actually on YouTube. I found it not so long ago, and it goes through all of his sort of old workout routines, and he actually takes some guys through like a week of his training. And obviously the guys after the end of every single session are a bit worse for wear, because Dorian was the king of high intensity training. So if you ever need some inspiration or something to go from, I highly recommend you watching that. You can take quite a lot from it, with it being quite educational, but also it's entertaining to see these guys who think that they can lift these heavy weights and actually it turns out they can't. Now, another tip, probably one of the most important tips that I'm going to give you today, is to decide what your goal is for training. I spoke about it in episode 1, if you guys want to go back and listen to that, on how to stay motivated in working towards a goal. But deciding what you want to achieve is probably the number one thing you need to do. Because without an end goal in mind, how can you work towards it? Or how do you know what you need to do to get there? Are you strength training to try and get stronger, to perhaps go into a powerlifting competition where it's essential that you focus on your compound movements? Or are you looking to do more of a physique kind of bodybuilding goal where hypertrophy training might come in? Do you want to get fitter, where you may use a combination of cardiovascular training and perhaps functional training or CrossFit exercises? Without that end goal in mind, you cannot move forwards with your training. So that's why I believe it probably is the most important thing that I'm going to tell you today. Finally, what would you say to me if I told you you were doing too much? You're training too much, you're putting too much effort into trying to achieve your goal, when in reality, and in fact it's a massive misconception within the entire fitness industry, that you need to train X amount of days a week to make good progress, when in actual fact A lot of the time, what you'll find is less is more. By cutting your training down to perhaps 4, certainly no more than 5 days a week, and implementing set rest days, what you will find is that your ability to train at a higher intensity goes up, and that you feel a lot more refreshed, and your muscles will show fewer signs of fatigue. This is because not resting enough will actually inhibit your body's ability to undergo effective protein synthesis, which is when your muscles and your body repairs the micro tears you make during your workout. Simply resting is essential not only to your speed of recovery, but also to your quality of life. If you're constantly thinking about making time for the gym and constantly spending an hour to an hour and a half in the gym on a daily basis, there's not a lot of leeway for things like relationships or family events that you might have to plan for. Being into fitness is all about balance. Yes, go to the gym 5 times a week, but when you're not there, make sure you're making a conscious effort to rest and spend time with those people that matter, or spend time doing the things you need to do outside of the gym to improve the quality of your own life. So, in short, train hard, train smart, listen to your body, and when you start to show signs of fatigue, when you start to feel tired, take a day off. Maybe take an extra day off if need be, and benefits you'll see from that are unbelievable. I promise you now, the more rest days you can take, the better results you'll get from your training sessions, regardless of what your goal might be. So that wraps up episode 2, guys. Any feedback you might have, don't be afraid to drop me a message, let me know what you thought. Again, show me your listening and your thoughts through your Insta story. Make sure you tag me so I see it. I appreciate any comments you guys might have in how to make these better. I am still looking for a new microphone, so hold off on that one. I will be purchasing one soon to make the quality of these a lot better. But until next time, guys, enjoy your week, and I'll catch you in the next one.